Scott.
Mark.
It's episode 14.
My goodness.
This is a fun one. It has been a wild week for us over here.
Yep.
And I don't know, we've gotten to play a lot of things recently, both together, separately. It's just for as thin of a month as October was, it certainly feels like November is shaping up to be just a lot more gaming, which is really weird. It's normally flipped for me.
Yeah, same. Usually October, since it is my birth month, I spend a lot more time with friends. And so that's what I want to do, is play board games of any variety. And I was gone for almost 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And so I was out of commission.
And for me, it just turned into the nights that I would have had because we did 3 different Kickstarter related releases.
Right.
There was my time.
Yeah.
If anybody would like to assist and be an editor for Board All the Time, hey, reach out. I would love you. My wife probably would too, because
oh my God.
Natalie was like, boy, I lose you a lot for editing. I'm like, I am sorry.
We're trying. We're trying to get as fast as we can.
We're trying, but it's still about an hour per produced 10 minutes.
Ugh.
Yeah, it's a lot. Well, despite how much we may have been playing, let's talk about what's been on our table. And I feel like I have had a real array of quality occur over the past few weeks.
Oh, very nice.
Well, some of it is good. Some of it is not.
Oh, no.
So there is a publisher, Prolific Games, which I think is very funny because they actually don't have that many games for being around as long as they've been. They came up with Flapjacks and Sasquatches forever ago. It's a game that it was fine at the time. It is not one that I have loved anymore, but I appreciate what the company does. And they do this thing for Lumberjack Week, and they call it Platter Day. And they had a big sale on all their stuff. I'm like, you know what? I'll support the company. I like it.
Yeah, because it had a fun pun, and we all know you like puns.
I also have that nostalgic tinge for Flapjacks and Sasquatches because we just played it endlessly back in 2012.
Okay.
But the game is very long, it's very mean, it's very random. At this point, it is well aged, and I can't really recommend it for anybody. But they did release Flapjacks and Sasquatches, the dice game. And you know what? It's really good. It's silly and it's quick and it's fun to play. It resolves the big issue of Flapjacks and Sasquatches by taking a lot of the take that away. You no longer are required to have an axe. You now roll your axes and they give you a certain amount of chops. It actually works very well. It still has a little bit of that take that based on being able to steal things, other dice that are stored in front of people, but it's essentially a push your luck game, and for a very quick, funnily themed game, I've been very much enjoying that.
Fantastic.
The other game that I got out of that we have played is Lumberjacks with rocket launchers, which I don't hand a 1 out very often because the game has to fundamentally not work, and this game is a 1. It is so confusing, and it's hard to play. It's hard to parse, wait, what cards go where, when. It's long. It's not very good.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, that was one that you missed. And
oh, no, I'm so sad that I missed that game.
Yeah, it was not good. I've been playing a lot of Tend still, even though it's our prototype copy, because I was provided some of the balancing changes, and so I've been able to work around the out-of-date components a little bit by just a little bit of modification. I'm liking the game even more now than I did when we were playing in our Kickstarter review period.
Oh, nice.
Because the Tend to action feels much fuller now. It feels like a viable strategy. So really liking that one. I finally got to teach you Dune Imperium.
Yep.
And I know you are holding your opinion on that until we can play it a little bit more, but I always love playing Dune Imperium. And then we got to play some Flip 7. I've played it with multiple groups. I've really enjoyed Flip 7. For a cheap, quick little card game that's perfect for that take home to the family, really a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we have to talk about how this all came about. James was on the show. James Hudson was back in episode 9. And when we were talking about what was on his table, what was he playing, he brought this one up. And, you know, when you have an industry leader, you listen. Mm-hmm. And over my birthday weekend at the beginning of last month, I happened to be in Indianapolis because I was at a work convention and then was going to a Pink concert later on that weekend. I was like, oh, I'm going to get myself something. So I had to be down near close to the Fashion Mall and stopped by the guys at the Game Preserve.
They are a phenomenal store. I love them. They're one of the best in Indy. Really like Game Preserve.
Yeah, there's a lot of great stores in Indy. I have not had a problem with... There's a lot of great stores in Indy.
Family Time and Game Preserve, great stores. The rest are, if you are not a Magic player, you really don't belong.
That's true.
Because if you're a Magic player, you can get good stores.
Oh, that's true.
I'm not a Magic player,
that's
so
true.
it doesn't help me there.
Yeah. If you're a big board gamer, definitely go to the Game Preserve. Love going there. I happened to go down there. I was looking for something new, but I was like, I really need to use your guys' restroom, and walked to the restroom and saw the stuff that they were getting in from their shipment. And there's Flip 7. And I went, oh, well, I have to buy this because in case Mark doesn't grab it, I want a copy. Regardless if Mark gets a copy, I'm going to want a copy because I play with other people that isn't Mark. And we both bought it in the same weekend.
Yeah, funnily enough, I was going to Barnes & Noble because I was there for other reasons, and I was able to get Veil of Eternity, which ironically, James also talked about that episode. And I had been on the fence about buying it before his recommendation. I picked it up, and as I was on my way to the register, they had Flip 7 for like $9. I'm like, yeah, that's easy.
Yeah,
I'm in.
I think I spent 11. It was nothing.
Yeah.
The game is fantastic. Hands down, quick fun party game. There's minimal. I mean, there's a freeze card. Oh no. There's draw 3 card. Oh no. There's not a ton of take that. There's a little bit, but you can also use it on yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's not really a total take that. Such a good fun game. Thank you, James, if you happen to listen to this episode.
So long as you have a good way to track score, because there's no score pad in there.
Yeah.
So long as you have a good score pad, something to write everything down with, you're fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely phenomenal game. Other games that I've been playing a lot of Super Mega Lucky Box because that's easy, quick. Game that has been out for a little bit.
I believe I recommended this one to you.
Yeah, you did. Because basically been addicted to it for longest because it's a solo game and it's called For Northwood. Such a fun game. I'm actually trying to do the scenarios because the scenarios a little difficult.
They're challenging.
They're nice and challenging. And there's a little bit of flexibility because you're like, I'm going to do the scenario with the challenge. And so you might lose one of the cards that you use. Just absolutely phenomenal. And then we've been playing some Aeon's End Legacy from Indie Boards and Cards. And that came out 2019 as well.
Well, and you're streaming that over on Theater Geeks,
Yeah,
correct?
We're streaming that on Theater Geeks. We're streaming that one and another game I'll be talking about later on the episode.
Nice.
Yes.
The topic of the week this week is one that you and I kind of hit on, not accidentally, but it just was one of those, we started having a conversation, we're like, you know what, we should save this for the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
And this is retail versus crowdfunding. So do you like a retail edition over a Kickstarter edition? How do you feel about using crowdfunding? And we'll use those two terms, crowdfunding, Kickstarter, interchangeably. We're aware of BackerKit. We're aware of GameFound. Yeah. We both use all of them. But just for ease and simplicity, we're probably just going to refer to it all as Kickstarter more often than anything.
Yeah.
But that idea of, we know, despite what Kickstarter says, for the board game industry, it is in fact a pre-order system.
Yeah.
It may be 5 years, but it is a pre-order system.
Yeah, I'm still waiting on one.
Before we get more into the topic, how many have you had not deliver?
So at the time of that we are recording this, I have 6 that are currently in the pattern. I'm waiting for them to take my money. I have done 100. I've had 2 that haven't. I've never got my stuff from.
Sure. My backing is something like 150 things.
Nice.
Half of what I've done is D&D PDFs.
I am probably, I would say 90, a good solid 90 are board games. The other are books and stuff for D&D and other little accoutrements and stuff like that. So yeah, I very well versed, and now of course we had James on, and so I have more information about Kickstarter and those crowdfunding sources. So I mean, it depends on the company.
Sure.
It depends on the IP that they're using.
Well, let's start there. So are you more likely to back a new creator, a new product, or are you going to go back to somebody you've backed or is an IP that you already know and like?
So if it's an IP that I know and like, it's going to get the once, twice, thrice over before I sit there and go, yeah, here's my money. So like if it's a random person that I don't know, I'm going to definitely do my, is this something I really want? Is what they're offering with this IP, it's a yes. Or is it when it comes to my favorite companies, I'm like you have IV Studios, I have Roxley Games.
Yep.
One, because I met the guys at Gen Con putting out Dice Throne.
Yep.
Like it wasn't out to the backers yet. I did a late back in while I was standing there at Gen Con. And I was just impressed with them as a company and as a group of people. And I went, okay, smaller independent ones, they have to really, unfortunately, you have to sell me It's the elevator pitch. It's like, I'm going to look at this. I'm going to get all that information that you're going to give me. Is this going to have me say yes?
Sure.
Unfortunately, a lot of those smaller developers, they aren't able to do the time, or they accidentally neglect and don't. So I end up passing on quite a few of them. But there has been a couple that, yes, I have.
There are a few different categories that I look for when I'm thinking, am I going to go in?
Yeah.
The first one being, can I get it at retail, and would I want to buy this at retail?
Right.
If that is the case, I am most likely going to wait for retail.
Yeah.
Garfield games, they always hit retail. Always. I may have to chase down a couple promos if I feel that way, but honestly, their promos are never like, woo. Right. So, that's one that I know it's quality. I know they'll ship. I know they'll ship very timely, but not one that I'm going to go after because I know I can get them later.
Right.
So for me, it really is breaking down to what does the availability scale look like? And if this were on a shelf right now, am I going to buy it?
Right.
Because there are a few markers that I'm looking for on a campaign. Most of them actually relate around the creator content that they're listing to, not out of any selfish, like self-promotion at all, but it means that they have been confident enough to send their game out. It means that they have had playtesting from them. They've probably gotten feedback, but at the very least, they trust their game enough to have other people put it out there and then link out to it.
Right.
So for me, that's a big deal. If they are missing, the other big thing that when I'm looking at it is, what edition am I going to pick?
True.
Most of the time, if it is going to be almost identical or simply identical to a retail release, I'm just going to wait for retail. I love All Play. We have talked about many of their games on this podcast. Yeah. I generally don't back from them because I can get them at Gen Con. I can get them from their website. I can get them from anybody that does All Play as a backer fulfillment service. So I never feel like, ooh, I'm going to miss this stuff. River Valley Glassworks was an exception for me because I was so, and still frankly am, obsessed with River Valley.
Oh my God, such a good game.
But on the whole, their stuff, I'm not going to back because I'm going to get it at retail.
Right.
I just am. Versus looking at a deluxe edition or fancier pieces, anything that I would look at and think, I could get this at retail, or maybe it would be something that would be something I could try to track down in a secondary trade, anything like that. But all the extra bits, are they worth it to me? Do I care? I like Spot UV on a box. If that's the only change like it was in Cosmoctopus, I'll wait for it. I'll get it at retail. Something like Flamecraft was, again, we've talked about that ad nauseum on this channel, but part of the reason I want to bring it up here is I looked at it and I knew that what I was able to get, the extra fancy dragon, the pink dragon, all the extra little bits, the metal promos, coins.
Yeah.
When I was doing the math comparison on it, it made more sense for me in that moment to back it than wait for it at retail. Because I was able to find the stuff because it was just in the box. And it was staggeringly cheap to add it all in. So then you go all the way out to an all-in big campaign. And frankly, the only people that I am willing to do that with is IV. And, their all-ins aren't that expensive. Yes, they are in the sense of their super deluxe editions are super deluxe and they are not cheap by any means. But I also know that the game I'm getting out of that is super high quality. So I am not a person that goes in for big, huge campaign games. I don't go in for big, huge mini things, Nemesis withstanding. On the whole, if I am looking at how am I going to source the game, it really does come down to what is its availability? What are the extras I'm looking at getting? And is it a way that I can support somebody? Because Mad Kala is one of those games where it should hit retail. But Druid City is a small operation. It might not hit. And I friggin' love that game. So I am going to back it and try to have it in my hands.
That's exactly why I did it too, because it was one of those things of, I know you're going to have it, but I want it because I have other people. And I like Druid City. Druid City Studios, incredible game company. So I want them to have my money because I want them to stick around. Going back to River City Glassworks, I went the deluxe edition. It gave me the glass pieces.
Well, you went up to the Founders. I went to the deluxe. Because it gave the extra dual layer player boards for the pans and some extra stuff.
But so I went to the next. I went to the next level, which was the Founders level, which gave me the glass pieces, gave me the second bag, gave me the slip cover, which really nice. I really, really like it. I'm happy with my choice. Then I look at I
am very happy with the choice I made.
Oh, yes.
When we set our copies side by side, I actually ended up liking mine better because I didn't like the glass pieces.
Right. And then talking about going all in on something crazy, my mini game, which is Marvel United. I knew that the retail version was only going to have 6 people. It was only going to have 1 or 2 villains, and at retail version, I was not going to play this game. Not going to happen. Not going to happen at all. And so I did. Unfortunately, I am a collector. I am a completionist, which is very much my downfall.
Simon certainly takes care of it for you.
They really do. And then when they sat there said, hey, y'all want all of it? When it was the second campaign for X-Men, I went, you're darn tootin', I want all of it. And I swear it was half a paycheck. But, I have it.
Wasn't cheap.
It wasn't cheap. And I still haven't played a third of it.
No, so what's interesting is when I was writing up my notes for this segment and what questions I was going to ask, we were going to talk about, you ruined one of these questions.
Of course I did. Because that is what I do.
You don't get rid of games.
No.
It's very frustrating.
I know.
So when I was looking at it, I went through my list of what I've backed. And again, I've backed on Kickstarter, GameFound, and a couple on BackerKit. We won't talk about the pros and cons of each platform here.
No.
But there's a reason BackerKit is by far the lowest for me. But I wanted to see how often am I keeping the games versus getting rid of the games if I am backing them. Because if I am backing them and I've only got 1 or 2 left, it really doesn't make sense for me to keep backing.
Right.
And there are certainly games that have come, hit, and gone out immediately. There was one in particular that it was very late. It was like 3 years late. And by the time that it came in versus when I backed it, I was a different person, was exploring different parts of the hobby. And when that one finally came in, I was like, this is gorgeous, but it is not for me. And I ended up trading it away. That almost never happens, which is a good thing, I think. When I look at my total amount, I am somewhere in the 70% keep rate, which is not perfect by any means.
Right.
But because of the type of campaigns that I normally back, that means that they're good trade fodder or they're good secondary market fodder. So I have been generally pleased with crowdfunding, Kickstarter in general. I've gotten some games that I really, really love out of it. There have been a few misses, but man, there are some that I am so happy I've got.
If I sit there and I think about the games that I've kickstarted, and yes, I hold onto all of mine, I would probably have to say that a good 75% I still put into a rotation. Like I sit there and like, you need to come down off the shelf. You need to come with me to some place, and this will be the perfect weekend. There are some that I've got, I'm like, oh boy, was that a choice. And I'm looking at my list now. You were talking about that, and I'm like, yeah, I probably should look at these things. Thieves Market was one of my first ones. I haven't played that in forever. Ginger Dead House, haven't played that one. Yeah, okay. But then like Joking Hazard and Exploding Kittens, they still make an appearance every once in a while when I want to have a really weird time. And those are some of my earliest. Santorini. I've got the new one is eventually going to be coming to me. I love that game. Even the original will never leave my collection because it's Greek mythology. And now that I've seen what they're
when you
doing,
say original, you mean the Roxley original, or do you mean the original?
The Roxley original. Yeah, the original is rough.
Same game, just much worse components.
Yeah. I like my games, and I make sure to make a habit of grabbing them and getting them back to the front of the list so that they can come out and see the light of day.
Going through, I opened up my Kickstarter app while I was sitting here.
Yeah.
And the majority of what I backed didn't actually end up within retail.
Oh.
So it's been interesting looking at this, especially going through and knowing some of the stories that have happened around this. But yeah, it's on the whole, mostly it is games that I'm not able to get at retail, and most of the time I'm keeping. One of the things I'm seeing as I'm going down my list of what I backed is a lot of expansions. And I have definitely shifted away from backing games entirely, and now I'm supporting the games that I have been into. So you mentioned a couple that you have backed and you're waiting for. I have Veiled Fate Tribunal. I have Eschaton's Iconoclasm, more Final Girl. So a lot of expansions on my end at this point. I have certainly shifted away from backing more games and wanting to go into that, let's support a creator. And the reason for that is actually one of the games that you absolutely hate.
Oh, goody.
It is Endless Winter.
Oh, my God. What other stupid genre do they need to add?
No. It's not a matter of what genre do they add. It is the fact that the base retail box is exceptional. There's a lot in there. The component quality is great. And I realized that was one of those games that, yes, the deluxe pieces are nice, but it certainly doesn't need them.
Okay.
And as I am tightening my collection and making sure that I'm fitting within certain shelf spaces and doing all the things, it's actually nice to get just the retail and get that retail box, because it means that I know based on who I am as I like everything in one box, I'm not going to buy all the other stuff because I don't want to change a box or have a multi-box solution. Darn it, Root, just put out a better storage solution for us. I'm sick and tired of having 4 different boxes for Root. Anyways, that's a totally separate rant. But that's something that I've noticed is I think the quality of retail editions has just simply gotten better because of Kickstarter.
They have.
But I am also more interested in finding what's at retail and then supporting the companies secondarily by going into expansions onto Kickstarter because those might be harder to get a hold of.
I think that's the thing is that a lot of these companies have started making sure that their retail edition is still just as good as their Kickstarter edition, and then the things that you get in the Kickstarter edition are really nice things, which then makes me want to give them my money because, oh, good, I know what your retail edition looks like. That means your Kickstarter edition should be more. And that's typically what it is. Or, I mean, sometimes it's just nice to get it first.
Yeah.
There is nothing like getting something first. I really enjoy it.
That's been an interesting knock with doing the podcast, though, is because of the way our production schedule has to run, we don't actually, even though I could get it early, I don't get to play it early that often because of we may be doing other content or we may be playing other stuff or I'm just locked in editing, whatever. So that as a
the last one.
benefit, that as a benefit to me has fallen off. But I also think what has reduced that is there is a mindset of looking at a Kickstarter game and saying, it is $50, and you kind of put the $22 of shipping as a completely separate price. And we were talking about it, I'm like, oh yeah, this is a great $50 game, when in reality, it's a $70-some game. And as I have really refocused in on how much money is sitting out there, and it is significantly lower than it used to be in the past, especially if it's something I can find at retail and knowing that I'm not going to be able to play it right away, I'll just wait. I have so much stuff already, I can just wait.
But on the flip side of that, yeah, I could probably get some of these games at retail, but I also know me, and something else will then take precedence. And I won't and I've always...
But is that a bad thing?
But see, precedent, I mean like precedence as in, I'm just going to be distracted in doing something else and I don't ever go look for the game. Like I've completely missed stuff that's gone to retail.
But that's my question is that a bad thing if something flashier has erased that out of your mind, essentially?
You're thinking something flashier is I'm going to go buy something else. I'm talking about like everyday normal stuff.
Yeah.
Living, just existing, and I feel like, oh darn, that game came out, I didn't go get it, and now it's gone. There's several games that I didn't kickstart, and they have come out to the retail, but now they're out of print.
Right.
I'm not going to get that game unless I do what you do, which I won't because of who I am as a person.
But I still think my initial question holds of, is that a bad thing? With as many games as you have, with as many games as we are already playing, if you miss a game here and there, is that really a bad thing?
I mean, yes and no. It caught my attention enough when it was on Kickstarter and I chose not to kickstart it, and oh no, will I get it? There's a couple Kickstarters that I missed, and I know that there's stuff that's being offered that I will not be able to get, which sucks, and I hate that, but I won't be able to get if the book, because it is a book, goes to retail.
And see, for me, if I saw it on Kickstarter and I bypassed it then, that means that my brain's checked out of it. I will every once in a while go through the list of pledges that I have dropped or the campaigns that have canceled and be like, yeah, I'm fine to have missed that. I'm fine to have missed that. I honestly, sitting here, I can only think of one campaign that I have missed because I couldn't afford it at the time and I was really hoping it would hit a broader distribution, and it just didn't. And that was Atlas Sovereign Rising. It was like almost like a Nier Automata theme. It looked very, very cool. It had very good reviews from the people that played it, but it's a small Japanese publisher, just didn't come out. Other than that one, any time that I've bypassed a campaign, I have not had second thoughts about it at all.
There's still a couple that I'm like, the one is Palladium Games. They've reprinted the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles RPG. The regular book will come out, but the extra stuff not without other things in play. And I'm just like,
PDFs.
If a person puts it out there.
This was a more rambling topic than I think we were expecting it to be.
Yeah, it was definitely more meandering about running around the whole space that is Kickstarter and crowdfunding.
Final thoughts, final notes on, do you prefer retail versus crowdfunding? Is this something that as listeners you would like us to go into a more specific area and discuss? I would be happy to talk about this more. There's plenty more to talk about in the crowdfunding Kickstarter space, but we were just kind of aiming down the line of how do we approach it? What do we prefer getting?
Yeah, and for me, it's literally, I like both. I mean, I honestly like both equally. I just feel like there's a little bit more ownership. The game's a little bit more special if it's one that I've helped kickstart.
As a small coda to this, because I would say that I'm the other way. I actually now pretty solidly prefer picking things up at retail, which is why my Kickstarters are mostly for expansions at this point, because they can be harder to get.
Right.
As a consumer, I try and get as much as I can directly from the publishers. And so if that is an option that I have, I am going to do that. Now, the little extra question in here is somebody doesn't go to Kickstarter. They are going to do a pre-order on their own site. How do you classify that? Because for me, I would prefer to buy it from them in that way than having to go through a Kickstarter process.
If the idea is to go for pre-order, I would rather go to my local game store. And have them do it, because they're going to see that, oh, there's interest in a game, and then there's potentially that they're going to buy more than one.
Sure.
Because a lot of companies are now doing retailer side of it, and they'll be like, hey, you can get these 6 for this amount. And of course, but
Right.
I would much rather go to a local game store. Like, hey, there's a really interesting Kickstarter that's coming out. I think you should kickstart it. I think you should get this into your store.
Now we come to your bored all the time stamp specialty. This is what we're here for. Why did I play that? And this week it was me that was forced to play something.
Now, let's be honest. You were trepidatious at first. It was definitely in the fieldhouse of something that you don't necessarily like, but at least it wasn't pentominoes and having to flip and draw.
But if you remember when we were talking about our Gen Con episode, this wasn't anywhere near my list at all.
I don't remember your Gen Con episode. I've at least slipped once since then. So my choice in game, as obviously Mark has already hinted at, that this happened to be on my Gen Con list. It was also Jason's Gen Con list, and this is Warp Core Games and Good Games Publishing's new game called Star Tycoon. This is an economic game. You are working industry and manufacturing. It's very much a sci-fi space exploration game. There's commodity manipulation, end game bonuses that shift all over the place, income. There's a stock market. There's a little bit of take that. There's not a ton, which that part's really, really nice. But essentially in this game, you have a company to run, and the companies are random. You have a home planet and a little power plant, and that's where it starts, where you are purchasing planets and putting things on the planets based on what the planet needs for you to get points. And there's a little bit of set collection. I mean, there's just like a little bit of everything. There's not too much of anything. I've really, really enjoyed it. I've played it several times now. You have a fluctuating market that you can either use a lot or use very little. I used it in the game that I forced Mark to play. I used it much more than he did. I love the artwork. I like its theming. It all makes sense to me. Good quality pieces. For me, it's going to stay on my shelf for a while until I get something that's better than it, which currently I don't have anything that's better than it. Yeah, why don't you go ahead and say what you didn't like?
Sure. So I will come in saying that I didn't loathe it.
It just was
if you said, hey, we're going to play as 3 players, okay. It's not one that I'd be stoked to play.
Right.
But at the same time, I'm not going to have a terrible time with it.
Right.
That said, I would not play with more than 3. Because even when we played it 2 players, it felt long.
Yes. And I know where its problems are, and we'll get to those problems, and I will even admit to those problems when we get there.
So let's start on the positive side.
Yeah.
The first thing being, Good Games Publishing does a phenomenal job with their production and what they put in a box. I think you said Star Tycoon ran you like $35.
Yeah.
And for what all is in the box, and there is a significant amount in there, for that price point, it was a very good game. It was.
The cards were very good material, nice pieces, very enjoyable.
I think the only thing that you and I really, and I think we agree on this, that was annoying in the production, is the token tray. They just need to have rounded bottoms to be able to dig out easier.
Yeah, you couldn't get at those tokens very easy.
But beyond that, it's good, clear symbology. The art does what it needs to do. It's very much in that terraforming Mars realm of we are functional.
Yeah.
So it is easy to pick up. It's easy to learn. There's a lot of quick positives. And if you like economic games, you're probably going to have some fun here.
And even something that we didn't have to worry about, but if it would have came up, we would have found it in the book. Explanation of the cards that could have had a little bit of, to get more clarity
Sure.
So luckily we didn't have that problem in our game.
I did not have to read the rule book. You had passed it to me a couple times.
Yep.
And I just, every time I sat down to read it, my 4-year-old jumped on me and it just never happened.
Yeah, it's called a 4-year-old.
So you taught me the game. I felt like it was very easy to pick up. It's great that way. The entire time I'm playing it, though, I felt like, again, this may be changed in a higher player count game. The stock market board, largely worthless. I really did not like the way it functioned. It felt very inconsequential to me. And the way the turns happen, where you can make 2 separate transactions on there, but whichever transaction you're making, you can only go one way with it. Either 2 buys, 2 sells, or a buy and a sell, but they all have to be different tokens. So I felt like going to the stock market was never enough. I only have 2 transactions to be able to do is a little frustrating. I understand why it only allows you to buy 1 card from each row. There are rules within the game that as I am looking at them, I'm thinking, I get why you're here, but this is as good of a rule as you could have come up with. I feel like there was opportunity within the design to make it flow a little better for me.
So one of the rules of the game is you can only purchase from a row. You have to have the materials for it, but you only get to do in a row that has 3 cards in it. So it has to be an untouched row. So you can't reserve from a row that only has 2 cards in it. You can't buy a row that only has 2 cards in it. Why does that bother you?
Ultimately, why it sticks in my craw is the fact that you only get 3 actions on a turn and you only have 12 turns. And if I am having to burn my turns refreshing a row, I am losing a decent amount of my gameplay for that, especially for how lucky that can be. You had to refresh and I took the benefit of it. But when it came to like the planet row, we had a goal out that was have X amount of planet types. I lucked into them because you refreshed into them. I don't like how random that felt. It didn't feel like I was taking any kind of successful maneuver to get there. It was, is it on the table or not? And based on the way the cards need other cards and other tags to perform things, I didn't like how lucky it ended up feeling. It's one of my problems with a lot of those, here's a huge stack of card games, but Arc Nova and Wingspan, they don't bother me because there's enough other ways to interact and use those cards that it didn't feel as big of a deal. But I also have what I feel like are more turns in both of those games. Now, they are both longer games than Star Tycoon, so I will say that.
Right.
But there are just simply, for me, not enough turns in the game. I think it is a fine length, but when most of what I'm doing is either going to be I'm going to luck out and everything that I need is sitting on the table, or I have to start burning my turns to try to get what I need. And it's very possible that what I need just simply doesn't come up. That's frustrating. I think the illegal goods thing where it clogs up your token pool, on one hand, like I get that, but on the other hand, you are making so many resources that I knew I could throw away 4 gold every round because I made 4 gold every round that I wasn't using anyway. There's just enough stuff that felt clutchy or weird, or it could be improved on. The entire time I was sitting there, and I even mentioned it when we were playing, I just wanted to be playing Eminent Domain instead. And you have not played it.
Correct.
Eminent Domain is from 2011. It's Seth Jaffe, who is a designer I love. He did Crusaders. And that to me felt like a more elegant, easier to use system. And it came out 13 years before this game. And I would vastly prefer to play that one because it hits all the same notes. It has the same collect your planets, add stuff, do things to them. The entire time I'm sitting there playing it, I'm thinking, I would rather play this other game. And Eminent Domain has way too many expansions, doesn't need them all. Frankly, it doesn't really need any expansions. I'm fine to play that. I really like that game. And the entire time, I am just feeling, one is tableau building, tag building the way that Terraforming Mars and all that plays. Eminent Domain is a deck builder. I would rather play Eminent Domain. And that's really where it comes down to for me.
Well, I think also with the type of games that you like, I already knew you probably weren't going to enjoy this one because it is tableau building and set collecting and that type of stuff.
Which I like. I don't like economic games, though. Yeah. And for a game that pretends to be one with that stock market board, resources are so easy to come by that it feels like this big thematic push of you are a company and you are doing these things and you are going to develop these planets all fell apart because I never really had to interact with the economic portion. And then the tableau building, I just didn't like as much of the other games, and the set collection is random for me.
Yeah, I can understand that. There's some small things that are just a little drive me crazy. The big one, however, is one of your favorite things, which is the solo play, and the solo play is atrocious.
Yeah, you had me look over the rules for the solo play after, and you're like, is this read really what I think it does?
Like,
and it does.
Because I read it, And I went, there's no way. And then I read it again, and I'm like, I have to do this 3 times. Solo play for this game, which is the biggest, which is why I also will sit there and say, like, this would be a table if we do our table shelf and trade. If I sit there and put it on, it's on my shelf. It's definitely a table because if I can find something that's better, this could eventually go away.
Look at Eminent Domain.
I mean, we have to play it first. I'm not going to spend my money on it.
That's fair. I mean, you can find it real cheap at this point, though.
But the fact of the matter, when I read the directions, it stated that you are playing a game by yourself, and you have to do it 3 times.
No. You have to win 3 times in a row. And if you lose at any point, you have to restart back to the beginning. And so it could be more than 3.
Yeah. And I'm just sitting there going, no.
Yeah.
There's no way.
Because each game is really, half hour,
it's
45 minutes if you're playing solo.
Well, and the other thing is that you're playing a full game. So it's not like you're using half the pieces. You're setting out all the planets, all the level 1s, the 2s, the 3s, the specialties, the market. You're using all the components as you would in a full game.
And I think the setup is not as bad as that may be implied. It feels almost like Splendor, where you're putting out a couple rows of cards, you're putting out a board, putting some tokens on them.
Yeah.
The actual setup is not that aggressive, but that is a lot of table space
for a solo game.
For the solo game. And then having to undo it, because then you tear it all down and then you reset. And
3 times.
When I'm sitting there looking at it, I'm thinking, I would rather, in this case, play Jump Drive, where, again, it is quick turns, it's a quick setup, and even though the solo challenge is beat all 4 of these, you get to pick which scenario you go after, and if you lose a game of Jump Drive, you spent 10 minutes on it, maybe.
Right.
So playing 4 or 5 games, yeah, I'm playing an hour, but I feel like I've played 4 or 5 games.
Right.
Knowing that I would have to play an hour and a half to 3 hours minimum, no, unacceptable.
No, I completely agree, because that's a big ask.
And the fact that it tries to pull off events, and we didn't mention this earlier, but it is a huge stickler for me. There's a fairly sizable deck of event cards that you will see 3 of through the course of the game, and they are entirely inconsequential.
The ones that we got were inconsequential. There was other ones that I think would have affected us more.
But then that goes back into the
luck situation that you don't like. Yeah. But yeah, it's still going to be on my, I think I've got it on my BGG as a 6 right now, just because it's like, this is good. I enjoy it. It will stay on my table. It will be on my shelf for now. Hopefully something better comes.
So I have it as a 5. So this is as low as a table can get before it drops into trade for me.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. If somebody picked it up and said, hey, I got this brand new game, I really want to try it, throw it on the table, I'll play it. Maybe I can drum up some excitement for, maybe it's one of your first new games, because the cover is very attractive. It's very evocative of what you were doing with these space markets. So there's enough interesting there that I'm certainly not going to sit there and be like, no, I never want to play this again. But please bring other stuff.
Hey, BATT Family, Scott here. Join me and my friends for a weekly live play tabletop storytelling game on Theater Geeks Twitch channel. Check out www.twitch.tv/theatergeeks on Sundays at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Table?
Shelf?
Trade.
No, I don't trade. You know this.
I know, it's true. Now, I did just mention it at the end of the Star Tycoon segment, but it has been asked enough, and I know I put it in episode notes a long time ago, at least for me, when I'm looking at what is the score range roughly. If it is in the shelf, it is an 8 or higher. Trade is normally in the 4 or below, and that means the table is in that 5 to 7 range.
Yeah.
So it can vary and the scores can waffle, whatever. But if you're wondering, like, what do these actually mean? That's where I'm looking at it from.
Yeah, I would have to say it's pretty much around the same thing for me. I don't ever want to see it again. It's definitely going to be a trade. If it's a game that I know I will enjoy and I've played it other times, it's definitely a table. And if it's going to be something I'm going to keep in my collection, it's obviously going to be a shelf.
The other question we've had is, so if you're not keeping it for shelf, then how does it end up in your collection as the table? And my argument there is essentially what you were saying about Star Tycoon, of it is on my shelf, it's something I have, but for me, it is on the call list. It could go at any time. Maybe I am looking for something better. Maybe it is just a stopgap game. Doesn't mean that I don't own it, but it means more likely than not that I'm not going to own it forever.
Right.
If I put something on the shelf, I'm going to own it forever.
Yeah.
Or it's going to take something serious to come in and knock it out.
Yeah, very much so.
So with that in mind, I actually brought one of each, a table, a shelf, and a trade.
Same.
So let's go ahead and start with your trade.
My trade is going to hurt you
Okay.
and hurt your feelings.
Great.
I don't ever do this on purpose. We've played this game recently, and I went through everything, how I felt about the game, being sure, like, why is that I'm giving it this rating? Was it because of how my week has been, or was it something else? And unfortunately, my trade comes from Ivy Studios and its Moon Rollers.
So let's talk about this.
Yeah.
Because it is my table.
Okay. See, now, so just so that y'all know, we don't vet each other's list to each other. We sit here and we keep this stuff secret. And literally, the moment the word comes out of each other's mouths, that's when we
hear it.
That's when we hear it.
So
we like to keep it organic.
If we do. We like to make it feel that you are at the table with us.
Yeah.
Moon Rollers is as low of a table as I can possibly give.
Okay.
I want to play it again, and I want to try it at a couple different player counts, but ultimately, I know it's not going to stay. It doesn't have a solo mode, so there's no reason for me to go that way.
This is probably as high of a trade as I would get, because there's so many things about the game that are very, very nice and very, very lovely. But ultimately, I was completely bored. You know, I love dice games. I love push your luck games. This should have...
And I don't, but the publisher and the theme is what pulled me in, because we know my general adoration of Moonrakers.
Yes, you love Moonrakers. I love Moonrakers.
And it uses the same art from Moonrakers, and after going through and doing the Brink Terminal stuff, it's like, oh, that's really cool to see that character, and here they are, and all the things. Yeah, this one's a bummer.
Very much so. And the fact that for me, I do want to play it again because I want to feel that my feelings on it are validated. So that means definitely at a higher player count.
Yep.
Because it was just you and I. It hurt for me to sit there and put this game as a trade. And I know I can tell by the look on your face, it hurts you to put it this low on the table because your tables typically sit at the 6 and the 7. Like, I will play this whenever it comes on the table, not a problem. The fact that this is sitting at a 5.
Most of the time, if I have slotted something in the table, it's because there's some kind of issue with it that I can generally get past in the right situation. But, there are issues with it.
Yeah.
And there are surprising production misses with this one.
Yeah.
You open it up, and the one thing that every single person has talked about, and I cannot in any way, shape, or form dispute, is the cubes. They're nice. Like, the quality, the physical construction of the cubes is very nice, but the colors they picked wash out entirely with the card backgrounds, those purple backgrounds, and under downlighting. You can't tell them apart. If you have any kind of color vision issues, you will not understand whose cube is whose. And it is a very big deal to understand whose cube is whose, because there's no demarcation on them at all. There's no player symbol or anything etched into them. They're just very light pastel cubes.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah, that's a huge miss.
And it also features one of my absolute least favorite mechanisms that I really thought, it's the studio, it's the theme. Maybe they can get this right. IV has routinely proven to me they are mad scientists that make me like things I should not like.
Right.
And one of the core mechanisms of the game is whoever is the last person to finish a card gets the card. It does not incentivize playing together. It does not incentivize playing strategically long term, because my strategy is I'm going to do no more than 2 cubes on this, because if I leave one space open, you'll just come in and sweep it away.
Yep.
I like the fact that once you've completed a card, you can't jump to another card. That's a good touch, so you can't just bounce across.
Right.
But at the same time, when you look at the actual abilities on the cards, they don't really mean much.
No.
Like, I used a couple of them a couple times, but on the whole, I just got away with rolling. This one hurts.
Yeah.
It does. And if I am being truly realistic, this would probably be a trade, but I am willing to give this one more benefit of the doubt. But I know at the end of the day, it's going to shift down to a trade.
The other thing that really kind of hit me really, really rough, and it happened during our game, was once the person either gets 3 crew members that are the same color or gets one of all 5, that's it, game's done. And you happen to pull it off. You were the first player. You didn't have equal turns.
Yeah, this game does not end on equal turns. It's as soon as it triggers, it's done. Now, it doesn't inherently mean that that person is won because there are points that are scored throughout the course of the game.
Right.
But that's a big turnoff.
Yeah. Part of me thought about trying to go after all the purples because I had 2 and you weren't going for them. And there was one I could have gone for. And I just like, oh no, let me try to get a couple more points. Had I gone with that strategy, I probably would have won.
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so because the other cards on your side was worth more.
Because I had points that came out of the wild stuff that I did.
That's right.
And then I just rushed you on those hazard tokens.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the hazard tokens also disincentivize playing in a risky manner.
Yeah.
I love the game High Society. The entire point of that game is get as many points as possible by spending not the most.
Right.
And this has that same mechanism with the hazard tokens that when you go to a certain task and you complete it, you pull 2 tokens out of the bag, you throw them back in, and you keep it. And there's an array of hazard symbols on them, and whoever has the most scores nothing for all of their tokens, including the ones that don't have any tokens on them.
Now, in a 2-player game, that actually gives you a range that has to be within 3. And
within 2.
Or within 2, and we just happened to hit it. Had I gotten rid of one more of mine, I would have been 3 away, and then therefore I would have got my points, and you wouldn't have gotten yours.
Yeah.
You had more points collected and you had more hazards, but I was just 1 off.
And there's an interesting push there of you can try and shove somebody into that category and make them go after those tasks on the cards because they are generally easier to complete, but at that potential penalty. And so if you just complete everywhere else on the card that isn't that, then you just force the other players into it. There's a strategy there. I don't know if it would work. Frankly, I don't even think it would be fun to do because the tokens, even the regular cardboard ones, are very nice.
Yeah.
There's so many almost theirs with this game. The cards are all very pretty, but they are also all foiled, which means that could also cause a vision issue on top of all the cube issues. And I didn't even think about that until this moment. Yeah, there's some real misses here.
And it's unfortunate because I like IV Studios as well. They've definitely become one of my favorite places to play games. Since you love them, I know you have them. And I know it's always going to be a good quality game. And it's typically well thought of like their theming. So it's just like, I can just go, when I know an IV Studio game is going to be on the table, I can go, how is the gameplay? It's the only thing I have to worry about. And unfortunately for me, Moon Rollers, I have it.
Yeah, that's where that one comes down for us.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, I mean, so then what is your trade?
So my trade is a real disappointment for me.
Uh-oh.
This is one that I attempted to get at Gen Con 23.
Okay.
And it didn't come in time.
Oh.
So I ended up picking it up at Gen Con 24. And I had heard plenty of positive about it. It is from All Play, where, like we mentioned earlier, on the whole, I really like All Play games.
Yeah, great job.
Not this one.
Except which one? Oh.
Sale.
Sale!
So we had much more fun doing puns off of what Scott just yelled versus actually playing it. So Sale is a cooperative 2-player trick-taking game, which in the last year especially has kind of exploded.
Yeah.
And so at the time this was originally kickstarted in 22, I believe, much fewer options. You had Fox and Forest Duet. I'm sure there were a couple other things, but for easy to grab for people that aren't Taylor's trick takers, like that was where you're at. So it's a really neat theme. I have come to realize that I don't really love Weberson Santiago's art. I think it is very evocative of what he is putting forward, and it feels very thematic for everything you're doing in one of the games that he has his art on. I just don't particularly like it very much. Part of the reason that I didn't like it here is just the god-awful color choices they made.
Absolutely horrendous.
There are 3 suits, and they are like a dark purple with a neon orange on them, like a dark green with a bright yellow on it, and then an orange with, I don't know, something else.
I think it was like a bluish.
I think it was orange and blue. Really, seriously weird color choices.
Yeah, because you're not even like working off of the color wheel. Like you're doing wild variants.
Yeah. It's not great. And as a co-op trick taker, I actually appreciate the fact that it's scenario based. We've been really enjoying Jekyll and Hyde versus Scotland Yard.
Yep.
Way too brutal of a title on that one. But, those scenarios have been a lot of fun for us to play through, and we've really been enjoying them. This one, the scenarios take forever to set up because you have this long board in front of you that you need to put out very specific tiles. If you have the deluxe pieces, then you're putting out 3D wooden pieces, but otherwise you're still having to put them in very specific areas. And that takes a while. And with the exception of the expansion stuff that we didn't use, you don't want to touch any of them, which means that you are wanting to put stuff on the board that you don't ever actually want to interact with. That's not fun. And the way the game works, you have 9 cards in hand, I believe, and whoever wins 4 tricks first, that'll end the round. If you're not at the end point by the end of the 5th round, you lose. There are also storm lines that if you have not crossed them by the end of round 2 and round 5, you will lose as well. So there's more ways to lose, because then there's the Kraken deck that does its thing. For being what says a 20-minute on the box game, there is an enormous amount going on. There's so many moments that don't feel logically connected. The way the card symbols link together, because too many combinations can result in nothing, which means you don't move. I love trick taking. You love trick taking.
God, I love taking.
This was one that I had so much faith in, and it just didn't trigger, because then when we sat there and after we played it, we realized the sailing only gets longer and more complicated as the scenarios go. The round track doesn't. Nothing else changes other than you will just be forced to play longer and hope that you are playing more perfectly than each other.
Yeah.
There's some asymmetric player abilities, but yeah.
Yeah,
This was a big disappointment for me.
I love trick taking. I mean, I was raised on euchre. Most of my family is Canadian.
At some point, there's a very realistic chance we will do our top trick taking list, because we have played so many. I was on Jamie Stegmeier's channel last summer for top trick taking games.
Yeah.
Like, I love this genre, not this game.
Yeah. The sheer fact of, I have to get this trick, because if you get the trick, we're going to hit the Kraken, or we're not going to go anywhere. And the whole thing is there's so many symbols and so many combinations. You're, like you said, not going to have it. There was a couple times where, like, okay, you need to take this trick. I'm like, yeah, I'm looking at my hand going, yeah, I can take the trick, but it's your symbol you're going to throw. Am I going to match it? Mm-hmm. And sometimes, yeah, I took the trick. We didn't move. And
not moving is a death sentence in the longer scenarios.
Yeah. And literally, the only thing that we got out of that game that made it worth it was the fact of we kept punning, and it was just
really some phenomenally terrible ones.
Like, holy cow, we should have been recording them. We're talking like 10 minutes of just really bad punts, and we
put some thought into it.
And we put so much thought, and it was, and honestly, we put more thought into the puns than I think was actually thought in this game,
because we weren't able to. Because it is a must-follow trick taker.
Yeah.
But, I looked at you, and it's one of those, you're not allowed to talk things. Whatever, I don't care.
Yeah.
Clearly, I play trick taking. I'm never going to reveal what is in my hand.
No.
Otherwise, I'm going to talk to you as we're playing.
Yeah.
It's more fun that way.
Exactly.
So that rule is out the window anyway. And I played a whale and on the 9. And you looked at me and I'm like, hey, if you've got a whale, there's a really great time to do it. And then I looked at I was thinking of saying that. And I looked at my hand and I was like, oh, I have all 3 of them. So we can't use the whale effect. Never mind.
Yeah. Horrible. Just.
Yeah.
Horrible. I mean,
this is not as low as a trade can get for me, but it's not a good one. I do not like this game.
Yeah, this would be like a 3. So that was
my trade. What is your table?
My table. Also, another game that just came out. I love the idea. I love worker placement games. I think the theming of this game is absolutely phenomenal. I have some problems with it. This is probably as low as I will go with this, because I would say, yes, this is in that 5 zone. Because, for the love of God, Devere, can you please give me some storage?
Really?
Rock Hard 1977.
Man, you were flying high on this one at Gen Con, too.
I wanted this game so badly.
And I punched it in the Hot Games room, and... Oh, I was with Jason. You didn't get to see the pieces.
No, I didn't get to see it.
Because the pieces are great.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, and I think that's probably another reason why it ranks so high, because like the pieces are flat minis.
Yeah.
Like, and there's one for every single player.
There's nice standees in there. The player boards are these super cool dual layered amps with the knobs that you turn.
You could turn them to 11. Absolutely phenomenal.
I would have never guessed this was going to be your table.
And it's a 5, basically, because I should not have to spend a bunch of money to make a base game sit properly in itself. I literally have a box full of cards bouncing around in my bag now.
That is a known issue with DeVere games, though, where they give you exactly the size. It's like what Garfield can do.
This is my second DeVere game I've ever bought. My first one is Cities, which I also bought at Gen Con this year.
Do you remember Millefiore?
Yeah.
That's DeVere. And most of that box, if you remember, we talked about it. It was pre-podcast, but I looked at him like, I am so happy I got this on deep sale, because if I paid the full $50, I would be furious.
The fact that I spent as much money as I did on the game, because it was not a cheap game. What I will say it has going for it, the theme is phenomenal. Like,
I mean, it's lived experience from the designer.
It's lived experience from Jackie Fox.
Yeah.
And she was part of the Runaways. And a 4-time Jeopardy champion or 3-time Jeopardy champion. Like, phenomenal game. Like, phenomenal credit to her.
Yes.
I wish she would have gone with a different company.
So here's my question then. Is the production the problem, or is there something in the gameplay that is dropping that low? Because it is very viable for both reasons why I would drop a score as low as a 5.
So the fact of the matter is, the cards are in okay quality, because there's so many of them.
There's a lot.
So then it's daytime, you have your candy cards, you have the event deck, you have the random gig that sits in the nighttime, and then there's the 5 locations that are the after hours that also have their own decks. And they're not small decks. They're 30 card decks at least. Mm-hmm. So I have 210, 240 cards just shuffling and mixing in this box. I cracked it earlier this week, my buddy Eric and I, which he will be on the podcast.
You'll hear him next episode.
We sat there and went,
that's a bummer.
But what I will say, there is still a lot of elements in this game that are a lot of fun. I will definitely bring it over here because I do want you to play it. The other problem that I have with DeVere is that you got to assemble your boards, which I was like, ooh, this is really cool. So like I'm assembling these speakers.
They come together the way that the boards in Sky Team come together, where they are cut out dual layered. So you have like the sticky tape that goes on them and you plug in the knobs and everything.
Yeah. I didn't have enough knobs.
Are you kidding?
I had plenty of rings. One of my amps is missing a knob.
What's funny is in the copy that I punched, I had 2 extra.
Yeah, I have 4 extra back rings. I'm still missing. I'm missing one of my knobs.
That's a bummer.
And so, like, technically, right now, I can only play for 4, which super right.
And those amps are not small.
They
are the size of the box. And so having 5 of those plus all those cards, that is a heck of a table presence.
And the board fits in the box. The amps go up to the edge of the box, and there's like 1.5 inches around on 2 sides. Mm-hmm. Fix your stuff. And so, yeah, that's why it says low for me on the table side, because I think there's some really good gameplay that can happen. Great replay, because there's like 10 characters.
And here's one of the other DeVere moments. They specifically announced that there is a playable character of Jackie
Fox. Yeah.
That is a promo that you can only get from the first print copies. And there's a whole, like, we're never going to release this again. And yeah, it turned into a whole thing. That was actually a bit of a snafu at Gen Con.
Oh, yeah. My copy that I picked up at the Game Preserve didn't have a Jackie Fox.
Bummer.
So,
oh, man.
Such a table.
That sucks. I do want to try it, but But I will say that DeVere is more often than not, from everything I've played from them, they are a publisher that I appreciate what they are doing. Their games are not for me.
Duly noted.
So my shelf then.
Yeah, so we're on our shelves.
Now we get to be a little more positive.
Thank God.
And I wanted to bring this one in because this was a retail versus crowdfund.
Oh, so even going back to what we were talking about.
Correct.
Cool.
And this one is available in retail now, which is great. You can actually find it at Barnes & Noble for fairly inexpensive. And I got it on Kickstarter. The design team is I believe, husband and wife pair. And they were just like, hey, we're just going to put this game out into the ether and hope it works. And stunning production on this thing. The Kickstarter gave me access to 3 different expansions for it. They have a new Kickstarter that funded earlier in the year that I am very excited for that one to come out. And there's going to be a new expansion for this in there. And the game is called Botany.
It's a gorgeous box. Like, absolutely stunning box.
Oh, yeah. The production quality of this continues through the box itself.
See, that makes me very excited to actually give this game a shot.
Yes. I think you will enjoy this one. I will be interested to see where you are on the scale, because this is either going to be like, okay, it's a table, or boy, do I love this.
I'm going to be like a 6, 7.
You're going to be either like a 6 or an 8, 9.
Okay.
For me, I would probably put in that 8 range. There's a few little things as far as rules, quirks, and everything. what botany is about, you are Victorian biologists going across the globe, getting specimens of plants and bringing them back to your estate in London. Now, thematically, there's some issues there. Very much so. And in fact, one of my friends that I met through the All You Can Board Discord, Ted, hi Ted, he is a professor of this type of stuff. He put me onto kind of the thematic issues of, that is biological colonialism, of going into a place, taking their biological specimens and going back to England with them. And that is exactly what you're doing here. Does that carry against the mechanisms in the game itself? I think that is something for you to consider. They do mention that in the rule book, so it is at least acknowledged on their end, but the mechanisms are really interesting as far as the expeditions go, because there are various regions on the board, and it is an old school map. In fact, every piece of art in this game is public domain.
Oh, wow.
So it really makes you feel like you are in the mid-late 1800s.
Yeah.
When you are on this expedition, you are having to kind of balance what your funds are, because the more stuff that you bring back to your state, the more funding you can get on future expeditions. But if you go too fast, then you're going to rush the end game. So there's a really interesting balance of, I'm going to stretch out into the world, actually complete these contracts, and then make it back. Because if at any point you are not able to pay for your expedition, because every turn starts by paying some money, if you can't, you must pack up and head back. And if you really can't pay, then you have to start getting rid of the stuff you've collected. Ooh. So there's some really interesting push and pull of, what do I think I can make happen? Do I want to try to push a little further? And there is a really high, solid amount of player interaction here. There are a couple of small expansions that I really, really like them, that put in some extra card types and some other ways to interact with the players. It's just one that, for the audience they are shooting for, at the price point they have managed to achieve, and the fact that you can just go find this at big box stores, I mean, it's a swing and a hit all across the table for me. The solo mode on this is also a lot of fun. It is a big game. It takes up a lot of table space, and there's a lot of decks of cards like you're just talking about. But for everything that's happening in the game, I had so much fun with it. I've been looking for an excuse to play it again, and now that we have talked about it, I want to make you play it again.
That does sound like something that you would make me do. We're both that type of person.
But it's very much a set collection game at its heart. And so depending on how you feel about that theme, and again, it is addressed. They didn't ignore the fact that that is the theme, but they are using all the public domain art and the iconography and all the gameplay elements they've laid on top of it. It's very clear, very easy to read. But if you like a rich and thematic set collection game that a lot of people are able to get to, I really recommend it. This one's a shelf for me.
That's awesome. You've had it out a couple times, and it's one of those that, like, piques my interest. My shelf is one of the rarities, because it is a re-implementation of a game I used to love. Now it has a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth, just because of who it's attached to. But this game was actually shown at Gen Con, but it wasn't available for purchase, and it is from the Avatar: The Last Airbender, Aang's Destiny. It is a re-implementation of the Harry Potter Hogwarts battle.
Sure.
Not trying to get political. I'm just like, I have some issues with the author. So
I look at it from the postmodern lens of the author is dead. So they have no inherent value or attachment to their work. And I look at it as completely separate from her.
I mean, unfortunately, she's still alive and she still gets money.
She does, but I'm not letting her rob my teenage years of the value they brought just because she sucks now.
That's true. But anyway.
Yeah.
The reason why this is on my shelf, not just because it is a re-implementation of a game that I already like, the fact that the stuff that they added to it makes it that much better. Mm-hmm. The difference now, if you've played the game, because it's a deck builder, you're playing one of the characters of the game. I will spoil the starting characters because, of course, it has boxes that you unlock, and it goes through the story from the Nickelodeon cartoon. The very first box, the characters that are available are, of course, Aang, Sokka, Katara, and Appa. You get to play the Flying Bison, which cracks me up. The things that they changed from the Hogwarts battle game that are in Aang's Destiny, there is an actual Destiny deck when you flip over the card, it says, you have to spend these resources, and when you do, this is the reward you get. They don't all have rewards, but sometimes it's cards that go into a specific character deck. The other thing that is a really neat and interesting mechanic is the Fire Nation's boat. All the cards have a 1 through 3, 1 through 5, 1 through 6, 1 through 7. It tells you when they leave, and if they're accidentally in the deck, you're like, oop, I must have missed this one.
Well, that's the way it was for Hogwarts Battle, because you could undo the sets, be like, oh, I want to go play Chapter 5 again, pull out all the Chapter 6 and 7 stuff.
Yep. Well, in some of those cards, they don't come in until 3, so it says 3 to 5, so it's great. The map happens, it's how you determine how many cards you draw from the Fire Nation adversary deck. So, it starts at 1, but there are adversaries that cause the boat to move. And if the boat gets to 10, all of a sudden now you're drawing 2 cards. And it's just oh, this got ramped up real quick. The other nice thing is that you have the bender cards. So there's a deck that is air. You have one that is water. Other ones do get introduced later. But then Sokka, who doesn't have any powers, there's an allies deck that I can focus on. And eventually, if I pick up an ally that does have the ability to bend, I can put him into my reserve. Then I can access those bending cards if I feel like I really need to have a couple of. Cool. Just a really nice, easy game. It's fun. We've laughed. We've had a great time playing it. This is solid 9 for me. Plus also Avatar The Last Airbender holds a really special place in my heart.
Yeah, and I have zero attachment to that theme whatsoever.
Yeah.
Didn't watch it as a kid, and when I tried going back to it, it just never triggered for me.
Yeah, I just might have to start watching it sometime this week.
Into our final segment of this episode, we are doing Surprise Party for our rotating. And I'll start because you mentioned this one earlier, and it just goes to show that we don't actually talk about our list ahead of time. Because you pulled it, I'm like, darn it, you're going to hear from me too. This is for Northwood. I have played a number of side room games as games, and I've never really been too enamored with them. Maquis just was a total entire miss for me. Black Sonata is really great, and I am terrible at it, so that ultimately ended up leaving because hidden movement for one player, okay, that's pretty cool. When I looked at this and I heard this is a solo trick taker, what? That's what? And it is inexpensive. The card quality is very high. The art on it is very cute. And for being a 4-suit deck of cards that range from 1 to 8, you have to make some really, really interesting choices in this game. You mentioned these scenarios earlier. I have just started onto them because I've just been enjoying playing it kind of loosey-goosey and randomly. And the restrictions that the campaign are putting on are very interesting. Essentially, there are 8 rulers that are laid out from scoring 0 to 7, which means that when you go to visit them, essentially you're going to initiate a round of tricks. You need to win that many of the hands. And so when you go in, you realize I have to win 7 of the 8, or alternatively, I have to win none of them. It's really tough.
Oh, it's dirty. I love it.
And figuring out when to trigger the special abilities can be just as important as almost anything else. There's so many decisions for a deck that essentially just top decks and discards a card. But there's so much going on in this, and it is so easy to learn. It doesn't require a ton of table space. It is a phenomenal little package, and I am just astounded at the fact that this is what it is. I really looked at this as there's no way this is going to work. I know that Side Room can do some neat things with theming, again, Black Sonata, but this exceeded every possible expectation I had for it. It feels infinitely replayable in the way that Cascadia's solo mode feels to me, because the scenario goals are so strict and well written, and they are interesting to engage with, that there is the regular mode and what is essentially an advanced mode for every scenario. It's just great, and it fits in your pocket. It is not much larger than a standard deck of cards, and it's just excellent. Across the board, this thing is phenomenal.
I couldn't agree more. The fact that you were the one that sat there and said, hey, if you need to try this because you like trick takers, and it's a solo trick taker, and I looked at you like I thought you grew a second head. I went, what? Mm-hmm. And then I ordered it because I couldn't find it around here. The fact of the matter is, this game is just sings so well. And the fact that, it's like $15?
It's inexpensive.
Worth it. Yeah. Absolutely worth it.
100%.
My Surprise Party is a game that we've played. It's been a little bit since we've played it. It's Sagrada Artisans. And the reason why it's on my surprise party, because the fact of the matter is, I love legacy games. Legacy games are absolutely amazing. We can talk about several of them that just absolutely sing.
We just started engaging in the Ticket to Ride one, and
that one too.
Early reviews, positive.
The fact that Sagrada Artisans was able to take their game and turn it on its side, on its ear, and on its head
simultaneously.
Yeah. The last time that we got together to actually like sit and play games, it was on the table. Like, it was like, this could be played, and then we just went, we got too late. Do we want our brains to melt?
Yeah, and we just looked at each other and said, we have too many other things we want to play right now, and it is too late.
But it would have been played.
Oh, yeah. We talk about this weekly, because I think that is the biggest surprise for me, is that not only is it a campaign game, a legacy game, it is one that the rules, even with all the weird twists and everything else we've engaged with, are all still right locked in my head.
Yep.
And I am still thinking about it as excitedly as I did from the first time we played.
Yeah. And we're, what? How many episodes in are we? Like 4 or 5?
Something like that.
Yeah.
I think we're halfway through the campaign.
Yeah. We're even on the games that we've won. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what they're going to determine.
I don't know
who technically wins.
I think I am technically a game ahead of you.
I think you are.
Because I think I got the last one.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just...
But it's been tight. Every single one has been very, very close.
It is a legacy roll and write game that is a re-implementation of a different game. None of that should work for me.
No.
None of it.
None of it. You should be like, we should be talking about how much you hate it every single time, because it's a roll and write. And the fact that it does what it does and does it so well, I was not expecting it.
That shiny, shiny box mocks me every time I walk into my office, because I have the stack of here are other people's games.
Yeah.
And it is just always right there.
Yeah.
Play me. And I do. I do want to play it.
And we will eventually. It's just, we need a little bit more time.
We need 2024 to just ease off the gas just a little bit for us.
Yeah. Can we just like have 1-2 breaths? But yeah, absolutely killer how well it's done.
It is expensive. And I know I didn't have to pay for it. I know that you ended up buying it. But if you are worried that you don't think there will be enough in that box to justify the price, there absolutely is. But know that if you don't like base Sagrada, you still won't like this. Still fundamentally the same game.
Yeah.
If you do not like roll and writes, there are significantly cheaper ones to recommend. And if you don't like a game that burns your brain in a different way every single game, and you just walk out of it exhausted, like, it's phenomenal. Like, it is so good at what it does, and it is so enjoyable every time we do it. Mm-hmm. But we can do it once, and then we have to pause and play other stuff, because it just bends you into a pretzel in a way that you would never expect from a couple dice and a couple of colored pencils.
Yeah. Because Sagrada is just absolutely amazing on its own, and then to do that and to give that to the world, oh,
stunning.
So good.
Thank you so much for listening to us. If you'd like to get in touch with Scott and myself, or any of the other theater geeks in relation to Board All the Time, you can hit us up at boardallthetimegaming@gmail.com, on Blue Sky at boardallthetime.bsky.social. You can visit us on our website, boardallthetime.com, where we have a newsletter sign-up, feedback form, archive of our episodes, and links to all of our social media, including our Facebook page. You can also join us on our Discord. The server link is in the episode notes. And finally, we'd like to ask that if you enjoy our episodes, please give us the like and follow us on your platform of choice. We know you hear that a lot, but after doing this many episodes, we really do now understand how important it is to help the show grow. Regardless, thank you again for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.
At this time, we'd like to thank our sponsors. Do you like shiny math rocks? I like shiny math rocks. Go to Robin's Nerd Supplies and use the code TheaterGeeks and receive 10% off your order. Links to the website is in our episode notes. Also, we'd like to thank EcoL Press, a local printing company here in the South Bend area. Happens to be a union shop, and they do everything for your gaming printing needs. And what's so nice is that they're environmentally friendly. You will also be able to check them out in our episode notes.
Scott, I'm bored of you, and I have a screaming child upstairs.
I know. You have the baby monitor down here.
I do. With that, get out of my house.
Wow. Rude!
I enjoy this one.
Yeah.
I have done that like 8 times.
You've done it a lot.